The story of the Apple Card is taking a weird turn. Apple is one of the most powerful brands in the world. When Apple announced that they were launching a new credit card of Goldman Sachs, people took notice. When it launched in 2019, it was considered the most successful credit card launch ever. It had a ton of hype around it, and it was considered a game changer. Also easily the card of 2019. This was supposed to be the card to help light the way for Goldman Sachs to become a consumer juggernaut. Fast forward 4 years and things are not looking so great. Now Goldman Sachs wants to get out and Apple is obliging. Today we're going to talk about where we are in this timeline, the 3 likely outcomes, and why you might want to reposition yourself, and also why the card might get updated. As much as people love it, the current shell doesn't seem sustainable. Big favor before we dive into everything is to give us a thumbs up to help with the algorithm, to appease our new AI overlords. Also, if you are new, consider subscribing. November 28, 2023, Apple proposes exiting its contract with Goldman Sachs in 12 to 15 months. This is by no means one-sided. Goldman's been trying to get out of this deal since earlier this year. There were rumblings in the start of the year, and then since the summer, they've been looking for a door out. This is also the final nail in the coffin for their expansion into consumer lending. The crazy thing is that this Apple deal was supposed to run until 2029. In addition to a credit card as well as a bank account, they were looking to launch a lot of other things. This included a trading app like Robinhood, and also their own consumer credit card independent of Apple. And remember, this is not just any random company, this is Goldman Sachs, one of the most storied financial firms.
When all is said and done, they do not lose money. They don't mind if everybody else does, but they don't lose.
We'll get back into this, but there probably are some flaws with the economics of the card. This proposal to exit the contract includes everything, so the credit card as well as the bank account. My understanding was that the savings account was very profitable. To me at least, this means that the income from the savings account was not enough to counteract the losses from the credit cards. It's crazy too because Apple is actually below market here. You're only getting 4.15% APY, which isn't bad, but it's not great. There's other options that are paying more, and it's not like they require a lot more work. Case in point, Moomoo is offering 5.1% APY to new customers. You also get up to 15 free stocks with qualifying deposits. If you are an existing customer, you just need to deposit $500, which feels pretty low and reasonable for anyone that's yield farming. It is a cash sweep account and it's FDIC insured. Also, in case you're curious, here is a list of their partner banks. Link below if you want to check out Moomoo and lock in 5.1% and get up to 15 free stocks. So Goldman was paying less than competitors, which means that they have more margin, but that still wasn't enough. Goldman Sachs is losing billions across the entire operation. In January 2023, it was announced that they lost over $3 billion on this already. Maybe $4 billion by the time we're watching this. They took a shot to diversify, but it didn't work out. Now they're going back to their core competency, which is big companies and high net worth. Other casualties in this include the General Motors card and also GreenSky, which did loan origination. Main takeaway, this is the widowmaker of credit cards, and other financial firms know this as well. Right now, we don't know if Apple has lined up any other issuers for the card. This is a pretty big concern. It also leads us into scenario number 1, that no one bites to Apple and Apple can't find a new home for the card. If that happens, then there's a decent chance that the card just gets discontinued. I'd probably give it about a 30% chance of happening at this point, but let me know what you think. Okay, so does that mean I should max out my cards because I don't need to pay it off? So discontinued doesn't mean that they won't collect the money that you owe. If the card was discontinued, you probably wouldn't be able to use it anymore to increase your balance, but you would still need to pay off what's already there. Remember that credit cards are just revolving loans. If the card does get discontinued, there's 3 likely problems. Number 1 is access to credit. Pretty straightforward, but if you don't have other cards, then you don't have credit. Number 2 is ease of adding additional cards. Credit is super weird because if you have more credit, it actually generally becomes easier to get additional credit. You see this with things like mortgages as well, where even though you might have a great profile, they might still want you to add additional lines of credit to show that you can handle it. Number 3 is your credit score, which ties back into number 2. Same reason why a lot of people's scores tank once they finish paying off their loans. The simplest solution here is to add 1 to maybe 3 no annual fee cards that work for your spending. Some of the best options include the Citi Custom Cash, the Capital One Saver One, Citi Double Cash, and also the Chase Freedom Unlimited. The Citi Custom Cash gets you 5% on up to $500 in spend on your top spend category each billing cycle. Lots of options here, and a lot of people pick a category that works for them that doesn't work for their setup, such as gas stations. Capital One Saver One is a great all-rounder that earns 3% back for dining, entertainment, popular streaming, and also grocery stores. Citi Double Cash is a great catch-all for everything else. You're effectively earning 2% back on everything. If you're looking at Chase, the Freedom Unlimited 2x on everything special offer is well worth considering. As of filming, this offer is only available through partners, so we do have a link. You get double on all of these numbers, so 10% back on travel through Chase Ultimate Rewards, 6% for dining, 6% for drugstores, and 3% for everything else. The doubling does replace the normal intro bonus, so be careful there, and you do get this as a one-time bonus after the 12 months. So pretty much a cash back match. If you are debating this and the normal offer, we do have a calculator that compares both, so you can run the numbers. I'll link it down below, but it should also pop up if you Google CFU Ask Sebi. Also, no clue when this offer ends, but feels pretty solid. On that note, if you do want to learn about cards, whether these ones or pretty much any other cards out there, and you want to support the channel, we do have links on the website, asksebi.com, and also down below in the description box. Make sure the offers are competitive, but using those links is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you guys in advance. Okay, but why wouldn't someone want to buy the Apple Card? Because it's Apple, it's a great card, it's an amazing brand. That's exactly why a lot of banks were in a bidding war to get this contract. It's a good card for consumers, but less so for the bank. A lot of this is because of how Apple designed the card. And by all means, I think these are good things. I think it helps people understand credit, how interest works, how you have to make payments in order to not pay interest, and pretty much all the one-on-one stuff. All of this in a pretty nice app. Personally, one of the things I love is that Apple Card statements are literally calendar months. The problem though is that Goldman Sachs, and probably Apple's future partner, is not going to be able to handle it. Most other cards have a closing between 1 and 25th of a month. So for example, if you have 250 people calling in, it might be 10 per day, which is pretty manageable. With Apple, given this whole setup and how it's structured, you might end up getting the same 250, but on one day. Another big issue was that Apple was trying to push for nearly all applicants to get approved, and this pushed up loan losses. A lot of people that maybe shouldn't have been approved were approved, and they got pretty good limits. Last year, it was reported that the Apple Card had a surprising subprime problem. They had some of the worst loss rates for credit cards, pretty much people getting the credit card, racking up a balance, and not paying it off. For Goldman Sachs, for the Apple Card, it was 2.93%. The higher the number, the worse it is. Chase was only at 1.47%. Capital One, which is focused on subprime, was only down at 2.26%. Outside of cards like the Saver and the Ventures, Capital One is subprime. More than a quarter of Goldman's card loans went to people with FICO scores below 660. Main takeaway, this is a card that has number 1, very high customer service overhead, given how it's currently structured. Number 2, has a history of high defaults among the current users. Number 3, a large user base that's subprime. That by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's about the economics of the card. The Apple Card is no annual fee, no over-the-limit fees, no late fees, or foreign transaction fees. This is amazing for consumers, and again, I'm a fan of this, but if you look at it from a business perspective, put on the business hat, if you were sitting on the other side of the table and debating on buying it or working with them, it starts to look like a toxic asset. It's kind of like when you're traveling and it can look great on the surface, but if you go during peak season when everyone else is trying to go, then the reality can be a bit different. It's not a fake version, it's still technically the real thing, but once you zoom out, you get a lot more context. On that note, that brings us to the sponsor of the video, Delete Me. If you're looking to travel, one thing to be careful with is making sure that your personal information isn't being shared without your consent. The last thing you would want is for a criminal to know your home address and the fact that you're on vacation. In that case, you would want to delay your posting, but also make sure that your home address isn't available online. For example, we were in Hong Kong earlier this month for almost 2 weeks. On YouTube, you might not have even noticed me being gone. On Instagram, I'm still in Hong Kong since the posting is delayed. Side note, follow me on Instagram at AskSebi. 40% of renters post about their trips while they're still traveling, and 2/3 of burglaries happen when you're not at home. One of the best ways I've tackled this is to Delete Me, so I'm excited to partner with them for this video. When I used to Google myself, I'd find hundreds of detailed profiles that shared my phone number, address, and emails. The crazy thing is that I'm generally pretty good at stuff, but some other sites are not. In the best case, maybe you get robocalls or scam emails. Worst case, you put yourself at risk of identity theft and fraud. Initially, I tried to remove all of this myself, which you can do, but it can take hours. I don't mind doing that if I'm watching Netflix, but the issue is that some of these sites don't have easy ways to remove yourself, or they just keep popping back up afterwards. Delete Me was super easy for this, and I've been using them for the past 7 months. In April, it reviewed over 2,000 listings and removed 42. For the month of November alone, it reviewed over 6,000 listings that matched my name, identified which ones were actually mine, and then removed the information from 16 data brokers. This saved me 12 hours of manual work. The really cool thing is that their software and team of experts don't just find and remove your personal information from hundreds of data broker websites, but they continuously scan for new data that shows up and gets that removed as well. On average, Delete Me finds and removes over 2,000 pieces of data for a customer in their first 2 years. To date, they've removed over 100 million pieces of data for their customers. So if you want to get your personal information removed from search results on the web, then check out joindeleteme.com/asksebi and use code SEBI for 20% off. Thank you Delete Me for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back into it. Okay, so who is in line to take over the Apple Card from Goldman Sachs? One of the names that have been floated around the most has been American Express, and on the surface it makes a ton of sense. American Express is expensive and considered a luxury brand, and so is Apple. In terms of branding, Apple is generally #1 in the world, and only recently did they start fighting with Amazon for that spot. For 2023, American Express was #7, and it's the highest ranking company among banking and financial services. It's pretty much Iron Man and Thor. At the same time, Amex has expressed concerns about several aspects of the program, including its loss rate. American Express arguably runs one of the tightest ships in finance. They're one of the most sue-happy banks, and they'll go for amounts that other banks might write off. Basically, American Express gets their money. I'm not sure if that vibes with Apple and how they want to be super customer friendly, which probably also explains the current default rate. I think a lot of people want it to be American Express, but it feels unlikely given everything. If it does go down this route, #1, I think they're going to aggressively cut credit limits, especially for people that are subprime. #2, maybe even close out accounts for people that are deep subprime that are at risk of defaulting. #3, they'd probably tighten the belt on approvals to de-risk. For people that are not in the credit card rabbit hole, American Express is very good about risk mitigation and will happily close your accounts or do financial reviews and just a lot of other things. They have great cards, and as long as you don't piss them off, you're good. American Express also has a history of standing their ground with giant companies to make sure that the moves that they're making are profitable. Given all of this, I give this a 5% chance of happening. One of the other big options is going to be Synchrony. So they are looking into the possibility of taking over the credit card program, and they are the largest issuer of store credit cards in the US. A lot of their users are subprime and have lower credit scores. They've also worked with Amazon and PayPal, so they've worked with big tech companies. Given what the current portfolio looks like and the fact that Synchrony has a lot of experience of subprime, it feels like the perfect fit. I would argue that Synchrony is still in the driver's seat given that this does kind of look like a toxic asset, but they still can find a win-win situation. Also, often if it is a rumor in the news, then there tends to be a bit of substance there. If this happens, I expect similar approval odds, but lower credit limits. I also think they'll try to push Apple to get some fees back. Maybe a fee waiver for the first few late payments or something, but Synchrony does make a lot of money on fees. Of all of them, I feel like this is the most likely, and I give this a 40% chance. Probably overshooting it, but be curious what you think. Another option is just another bank entirely. Pretty much picking a bank out of this. Lots of picks here, but each one has different issues. Chase and Citi were both in the bidding war initially for the Apple Card. The main issue, given how it currently is that it looks like a toxic asset. If they do go through with it, I see a lot of similar changes in positioning as American Express. Chase also already has Amazon as a partner, so not sure if Apple would be biting too much off the apple. Can they do it? Yes, but it's a big commitment for something that doesn't look profitable. For Citi, it's a bit confusing because I don't really know what's going on. My understanding is that they were looking into launching a new card, and that might be on the back burner given the current economy. Capital One is a pretty interesting one because they just got dumped by Walmart. Technically, they do have an opening and they have bandwidth. They're also very good at subprime because that's their bread and butter. At the same time, they have been pushing more upstream with the Venture X and the Venture X business and launching all of these Capital One lounges. If anything, it feels like they're building out an arm to compete with Chase and American Express. So they can go after Apple, but it might be a distraction, especially in the current economy and the risk involved. Otherwise, if they do go through with it, I see a similar strategy to Synchrony, basically lower limits to de-risk. Barclays is a pretty interesting one because they actually used to work with Apple and have an Apple Card. It doesn't feel that likely though because they've pretty much been on a holding pattern and they haven't really done anything in the last few years. If they haven't been able to launch anything, I think the Apple Card is too big of a commitment, and even the old Apple Card with Barclays was a very simple card. It was pretty much a shopping card like a lot of other retail cards. Someone else entirely could also step into the ring. Overall, I would give the someone else camp maybe 20%. The last option is an interesting one, and it's going to be Apple itself taking it over. Lots of problems with this, but let me cook. For Apple, this whole situation is a setback for its service business. And in fact, they have been looking at other revenue streams as iPhone sales have slowed down. So the service revenue is growing and increased by about 16% in the last year. So is there a world where they end up building out a financial arm and take this over themselves? On one hand, it seems illogical because they could just find a partner to handle everything. On the other hand, it might be their way to get even more market share. You might not know this, but in Asia, there's a ton of super apps like WeChat that do pretty much everything. So it's social, chatting, shopping, groceries, payments, and ride-hailing. In fact, that's what Elon's trying to do with X by turning it into a super app. The goal is that X will replace their bank within a year. So can Apple do the same thing, and would they want to? One interesting thing is that Apple is investing $1 billion into AI every year in order to catch up. One of the big pain points of the card is the customer service aspect, but if AI gets good enough, then maybe that's not a pain point, especially if you rebuild the app from first principles and make the chat a lot better. And obviously it is a bit different because everything else before has been more tech or software. But is it impossible to believe that they could take this in-house by maybe acquiring a small regional bank for their bank charter? That's pretty much what a lot of fintechs do, so Apple could easily do the same thing. I'm probably overvaluing this, but I'd give it 5% chance of happening. Acquire a small bank for the charter, build a better app, and then use AI to supplement to make sure that it's not a big customer service headache. But yeah, would be curious what you think. Again, if you want to learn about cards, we have links on the website, asksebby.com, and also down below in the description box. If you made it to this point, leave an Apple emoji in the comments down below, and I'll try to heart it and also respond. 3 questions for you guys. Number 1, do you think the Apple Card will shut down? Number 2, who do you think will take it over? And number 3, do you think they'll modify it to make it more competitive or economic? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. Big favor, thumbs up, consider subscribing, but otherwise hope you liked it. See you next time. Okay, so I had ChatGPT 4 make 8 iterations of an Apple-inspired credit card and make it subsequently more Apple-inspired for each one. Let me know which one of the 8 you like, and let's take a look. First one's pretty normal looking, but looks a bit busy. Next one kind of looks like a MacBook, so I really like this one. This one's too shiny for me, not a fan. This one looks weird, I don't know why, but also not a fan. This one looks a bit too busy, but it's not too bad at all. And I kind of like how the bottom right still looks like MasterCard, given that the Apple Card right now is a MasterCard, but also is an Apple. This one looks pretty slick and looks like a giant piece of metal, so kind of cool. Next one looks a bit too shiny, kind of like a plasticky one, so not a fan of it. Last one looks kind of like a freak show card, so I'm not a fan, but let me know what you think, unless it was pure metal. So if that was pure metal and it was like raised metal, I don't know how that would work for a credit card, but if it was, then that would be very cool. See you guys.